All right, everybody, let's talk about succession. Succession is nothing more as referring to how an ecosystem changes um, either from the beginning or after a major catastrophe. So there's two types of successions that we're going to look at. And basically we're talking about over time, how does an ecosystem change from very small plant life to very mature evolved, okay? So first thing we're going to talk about is, well, this is just succession in general. What is it? It's the regeneration or the creating of an ecosystem. So the two types we're going to look at: primary versus secondary. Primary means it started from nothing, and secondary means it comes back after a major catastrophe or some damage has been done. All right, so first one is primary succession, and the vocabulary word to associate that with that is the pioneer species. It's the first species that comes in to an ecosystem where there has previously been absolutely nothing. So the scenario that I like for students to picture is, imagine that a glacier melts away. So all you see below there is some rock. There's no soil, there's no nothing. It's just a boulder pile. A glacier melts mountainside. It would look a lot like this. Eventually what happens is, due to erosion, all these rocks start to weather and wear, and then small particles gather in these cracks and crevices. By the breakdown process, that eventually turns into what is a soil, basically. And so small plants like mosses and lichen can come in and grow in these cracks and crevices with just that small pebble matter as its anchoring system, acting like a soil. So that's where it basically all starts. And if you look at the next picture, you can see you see small green plants just kind of popping up on the rocks. If it's lichen or moss attaching to the rock, or in that small cracks and crevices of that moss. Okay, this would be like a perfect side of a mountain or a glacier where you see melt away and exposure for the first time. There's some moss growing on the side of a rock, which you pretty much see that in our area too. Some lichen here. Hard to tell the difference between a lichen and a moss. It just has to do with their reproductive process, but so they kind of get clumped together. After that, the next species to come in would be like your grasses. So the lichen and the moss are going to continue to kind of create that erosion effect and break down those rocks even further to make more of a soil base, so that small grasses can come in and plant. That continues to break down the rock and erosion and make more soil, and then you get your next level up, which would be small shrubs or flowering plants, and then small trees would come in after that, and eventually the big mature trees. So you get this kind of effect in the end. All right, so that is basically I'm going to come back to this one in a minute. I'm going to come back to that slide because I want you to see secondary succession, because the process is very similar, except something catastrophic happens, like a forest fire or a flood or something destructive that takes out basically all of the ecosystem. So nothing is left except for the soil. So the only thing that's available left is the soil. But that's fertile ground, and eventually that same thing happens. You see those pioneer species come in first, lichen and mosses growing on the boulders and the logs that are left behind, the charred logs, and eventually that would develop into grasses and small shrubs and bushes, and then small trees and plants, and eventually that all grows up into what we call the climax community. So here's you see the forest fire happens. This is what's left. This is the next year when you start to see the ferns and some of those small plants coming back. Again, same thing, devastation of a fire. Next year, the next coming years, you see first things that come back are the small plants, lichens and mosses. So this and the other slide that I skipped are what I'm going to bring up to end this all off. It takes hundreds of years to bring back a forest after something major like this. So imagine, if you will, someone put this graphic together of a forest fire due to a lightning strike somewhere around 1750. It's going to take 100 years to get back to just almost like a small bush, shrub, plant, small tree environment. Okay, it's going to take maybe another 50 years or so to bring it all the way back to a little bit bigger tree, all the way, if you could imagine, to past the year 2000 before you would see a completely restored, mature environment again. We call that the climax community. So back to this graphic, if you can put those two pieces together, you can see initially, right after it happens, you've got the pioneer species coming in, which is going to be your lichen, your moss, and your grasses. Eventually, they will grow into small grasses and shrubs, and that's going to take 1 to 5 years after either a forest fire or when you first start seeing the erosion occurring and you see moss and lichen turning that boulder mountain face into something of a fertile soil. Saplings would be your next to come back. Small trees, it's going to take them, and we're talking about pines. You see the little white pines growing everywhere. Okay, so takes about 5 to 15 years for those to mature in the environment. Then you've got your harder woods coming in, your maples, your hickories, those kind of trees, all deciduous, but still it's going to take a long time, 50 to 75 years. For those to reach a mature state, you're talking 150 years, and that's what we call the climax community. It's when it's to its most mature state. The ecosystem is completely established between plants and organisms. So those are all the notes for today. Talking about the difference between primary succession and secondary succession. Know the difference and know how they progress. And that's all I got for you. So we'll see you tomorrow for that quiz. Bye.